This lecture is called Biblical Poetry, and most of it's going to be on the Psalms, but I'll tell you something, it was a really difficult lecture to prepare, only because there are so many angles on this subject, and I find it all fascinating. And what I probably should do is take this as a kind of maybe a semi-improvisational introductory course to the whole story of the Psalms. Later on, very easily, one can make a lecture on the Psalms of Kabbalat Shabbat, on the Psalms of Hallel, blah, blah, blah. The Psalms are rife throughout the Siddur and any prayer kind of situation that we have. So let's just start. That is Esaenai, Psalm 121, the psalm that we recite every evening when Mincha is present. This is a quotation from the portion Shemot Rabbah, Mishnah, chapter 23, verse 4. And it says, it quotes, "From the day that God created the world until Israel stood by the sea, there was not a single person who sang a song to God except for Israel. God created the first man, and he didn't sing a song. God saved Abraham from the fiery furnace and from the kings, and he didn't sing a song. And also Isaac, who was saved from the knife, and he didn't sing a song. And Jacob, who was saved from the angel and from Esau and from the men of Shechem, and he didn't sing a song. When Israel, however, came to the sea," and we're talking Yam Suf, the Red Sea, "and it parted for them, they immediately sang a song before God, as it says, then Moses sang, and the people of Israel." In the Torah and the Nevi'im, the prophets, the Creator reaches out to man. The initiative and the message is God's. God communicates, we receive. Our free will allows us to either be receptive or to reject. In the poetry of the Psalms, however, human beings reach out to a higher power. However, we take the initiative. The language is ours. We make an effort to communicate. God receives. God chooses to respond or not, to give assent or to withhold it. The variety of forms and modes which the psalmist expressed themselves reflected the very diverse and changing moods that possess them, as they do all human beings. In short, the Psalms constitute a revealing portrayal of the human condition. These Psalms, to a great extent, infuse and inform the basic patterns of both Christian and Jewish worship, give character and essence to our respective liturgies, and in large part influence the life of our prayer and spiritual activity as we as individuals and also as communities. Besides the fact that the Psalms embodied the highest ideas of biblical literature, they also possess a uniqueness of mood and expression. It was bound to give them a universal appeal. Many of these Psalms were understood as describing the adventures of all of the people of Israel, but at the same time, they are very personal in character. It's lyrical poetry, the emotional aspect of the spiritual life. The Psalms are unique in literature. The book of Psalms contains almost every great religious idea which grew up from Israel. Some of the Psalms are epic poetry of the type of the song, very similar to the Song of Devorah in Judges, and the Song of Moses at the Red Sea, Shemot chapter 15, which we will recite this next weekend in the Parshat Bishalach. See, there are Psalms that express the ethical idealism of the prophets. Some Psalms express a love of wisdom, like the books of Proverbs do. Other Psalms show the great historical vision with the idea of God's role as the guide of human destiny, as expressed in Deuteronomy, Devarim, and in the historical books. The books of Psalms is kind of an epitome of the nobler religious ideas developed by Judaism. In the Psalms are imbued with tenderness, penitence, sorrow, victory, confidence, hope. It has presented the anatomy of all of the parts of the human soul. Heinrich Heine, the great poet, writes the following, quote, "Our collected sunrise and sunset, birth and death, promise and fulfillment, the whole drama of humanity is within these Psalms." So it's not surprising, therefore, that the book of Psalms is probably the most widely read of all the biblical books. The early church, the Christian church, made constant use of it. In the Christian faith, it was used to singing in the first assemblies for their worship, and ever since it is used profoundly often. The poetry. In classical Arabic and Western literature, the difference between poetry and prose is that the former, poetry, is contained within a framework of meter, a kind of a regular succession of long and short syllables, and sometimes rhyme. In biblical Hebrew, rhyme is hardly ever found. It is occasionally, but that's not part of it. And meter is somewhat unknown. However, parts of biblical text can be looked on as prose and other parts poetry, and we will look into that. The construction of a psalm is very unlike that of a chapter of Bereshit, Genesis, or Yeshayahu, Isaiah. Let's delve a little more. The formal conventions that structure biblical poetry. All poetry is shaped by conventions that dictate how long its lines should be and how it should be patterned. The conventions vary across literary traditions. English poetry between the 1500s and 1900, that's late English, modern English, called for lines in one of several kinds of meter, patterned rhythms at the ends of lines, and division into stanzas. For example, this is William Shakespeare, the greatest writer of them all, Um, uh, his sonnet, a Shakespearean sonnet, is written in what is called iambic pentameter. I'm trying to show that what some poetry does vis-a-vis what the Hebrew poetry does. So iambic pentameter is da 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 da. So 5 da das, okay, and the second, it's divided into 5 sections, and each has a weak beat and ends on a strong beat. So let's check that out. Okay, look at the top. This is Sonnet 18, one of his most famous sonnets, maybe the most famous. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And so here we go. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Next line. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. You see how that is iambic pentameter. Everybody get that? We don't have to go through the whole poem. I would love to discuss these sonnets. They're insanely beautiful. Okay, so with that, we move on to, well, let me just give us a little break and give you some music. So at the same time that Shakespeare was producing his magical play on sonnets, a little more in the south of Europe, there was a Jewish Italian guy by the name of Salomone Rossi, who was a composer. He was composing music for the synagogue, as well as other secular music too, wonderful secular music. But it is the music of that time infused with the highest level of creativity and Judaism's first modern great composer. Now I'm going to go back to the Shakespeare picture for a second. We see he lived in 1564 to 1616. And our friend Salomone Rossi, if you look at the upper left-hand side, 1570 to 1630, they were lived in the same time. And this is a Shir Hama'alot, Esa Enai, the same text that was from the first piece. And by the way, let me just say the first piece, I orchestrated it and our choir sang it with our orchestra. And just for everybody's edification, those were the days that Bernie Selig was one of our great singers. I'm not making a joke. Fabulous voice. He's laughing, but I'm dead serious about it. He really made the choir a better choir. So with that, that was when he was there. This is the Shir HaMa'alot sung by an Israeli choir. So beautiful. So let's get back to the discussion of poetry with these little interludes of music, okay? So in Old English, poetry lines were divided into half lines. You could see bagels for breakfast, bread for supper. And their length was based on the number of stresses, pretty much 2 per half line. Bagels for breakfast, bread for supper, okay? Patterning was based not on rhyme, but is a technique called alliteration. Alliterative words are words that repeat the same sound in a line or a sentence. And you can see the bagels, breakfast, bread. So 2 or 3 stressed words per line begin with the same sound. And as you can see, there are 3 in this sentence. The third stress element alliterated with at least one of the first 2, and it alliterates with both of them. The fourth did not. Okay, so that is a technique of alliteration. This is a gentleman, not a friend of mine, because I think he was before my time, William Langland, one of the, I don't know, great poets of England, but he wrote a wonderful poem. The Piers Plowman is what it's called, Piers Plowman, and it's got a lot of irony in it and talks about the economic situation of those times and social situations. It's a very interesting poem for those interested in that period of time. That poem, he was born in 1332 to 1386. This poem was written sometime in the last 20 years of his life. So here, let me just show you the poem. Here it is. Now, you'll notice I put difference. This is a very good example of alliteration, extremely good. Here you have a fair field full of folk, fond I bear between. I can't pronounce this in the way that it should be, but basically that first line means, among them I found a fair field full of people, okay? Second, of alle manner of men, be men and be, you see how those words sound with the consonants, they match each other, M, right? Next, workinge and wanderingge as per world, etc., etc. Okay, so that is a very, very good example of what was a very well-known technique in that day of poetry. This is not modern English, it's not Old English, it's Middle English, historically speaking. Okay, now patterning and alliteration in biblical poetry. So here we have, and I have to move the something here. Yeah, there we go. So here we have Uri uri devora, uri uri dabri. The rest of it is fine, but in English you have words that are praise. So that's kind of alliterative because you repeat the word and it has that pa kind of thing, right? And devora and utter. And why do I put that? And this is just my own feeling about it. Now, devora means a bee, a bee that gets honey, right? But divora and daber sound very alliteratively similar. Do you see that? So you have dalid vet resh, and then you also have dalid bet resh in this word. So they don't mean the same, but they do sound the same. So in that way, there is some alliteration in that. It's not a poem, but it's or is it? Wait a minute. No, I'm not sure, but it's that I just wanted to point out this alliteration pattern. Okay, moving on. Okay, here, this is interesting. Oh, it's interesting how it comes on like that. So this is from Lamentations, okay, chapter 4, verses 7. I'm going to do the English now because you can see what I'm talking about. Now, this is example of patterning, okay? In most biblical poetry, lines consist of 2 or 3 versets, okay? These have 2. Most with 2 or 3 stresses. Patterning is based on, and here we go, and this is biblical poetry we're talking about. In contradistinction to the alliteration, it's based on meaning, not sound. So here we have the Lamentations. Her elect were purer than snow, whiter than milk. So you have that feeling of white there, right? The color white, purer than snow, whiter than milk. Then we have their limbs were ruddier than coral, their bodies like sapphires. So you see how there's a kind of a patterning here where limbs and bodies obviously match. And that was my mistake. Limbs and bodies match. The white of the snow and the white and the milk match, and the coral and sapphires match. That is the basis of Hebrew poetry. I should say, excuse me, Hebrew biblical poetry. Okay, is that somewhat clear? I mean, it's wonderful to know, because now the next time that we do Psalms, and we should, I will point this stuff out. It's fascinating. Okay, now there's another kind of patterning, which is called chiastic patterning. And so what you'll see here, this is Psalm 3, verse 8. It goes like this: for you smote all my foes, the teeth, the wicked you smashed. Now, this is fabulous, okay? So you see now, you smote, you smashed all my foes, the wicked, or obviously anyone you call wicked is probably not a friend, right? And the teeth, the cheek, the teeth. So you see, it goes A, B, C, C, B, A. You get what I'm saying? It goes 2, C, and then it's like a V kind of thing. And that is, it almost adds a kind of a visual aspect to the poetry. Now, absolutely, there are many English poems that do that, and I should have given you some examples, but I didn't. But the idea is to get the idea, okay? Here is a second patterning, just to give a sense. These are longer sentences. This is from the Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim. For behold, the winter has passed over, the rain gone by and departed. So winter, rain, obviously rain, we're talking about Israel, not the United States. So winter means rain in Israel, not necessarily snow. Okay, so that has to do with seasons, right? The fig tree, going to the last sentence, the fig tree has ripened his unripe figs, meaning spring, right? And the vines and berry given off fragrance. That's seasons too, right? The flowers have been seen in the land. So that we're talking about what they look like. And the turtle of call has been heard in our land. So see and hear could be the same kind of thing. And maybe the central message is time to get to work, guys. Time to get to work. Okay. So you can see there's also an A, B, C, B, A chiastic patterning in this not psalm, but this quotation from Song of Songs. Everybody clear? Good. Okay, now let's talk about parallelism. There are 3 forms, and I give examples. One is called synonymous. This is so exciting, because now, and I'm going to say it again, when you go to the Siddur, you may even, when you go to a service, saying, where in the Psalms can I find this? Where blah, blah, blah. So it could be interesting. Okay, here's synonymous. They mean the same thing, but at different words. Psalm 15. Lord, who shall sojourn in the tabernacle? Who shall dwell upon thy holy mountain? So the tabernacle and holy mountain take the same general feeling of something holy, something that involves a higher power, okay? Antithetic, which is an obvious one. This thought is reinforced by the method of contrast. Psalm 1, at the last couple of verses, for the Lord regardeth the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. So the Hebrew writers had all these techniques to write their psalms, okay? The third form of parallelism is synthetic. So the thought continuing from line to line to build up a cumulative effect. Also, beautifully in Psalm 1, happy is the first couple of verses. Happy is the man that hath not walked in the counsel of the wicked, nor stood in the way, this is sentence B, nor stood in the way of sinners, nor sat in the seat of the scornful. So there's accumulation of energy that is put forth by that line to create its own structure. Everybody clear? I say everybody clear. I'm hoping you're clear. Okay. Okay. Now here, the Psalms were not read. Always, 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 always sung. The singing was, we're talking about Holy Temple days, was often in the antiphonal method. That is, one group sings a text to which the other group in another part of the edifice responded with an answering text. Okay, so Shiru Ladonai Ki Tov, Shiru Ladonai Ki Tov, and then the other group would say Ki Olam Chasto. You see what I'm saying? Okay, good. So the mode of prayer, this mode of prayer gives rise to parallelism, which we just talked about, which is probably the most notable common feature of Hebrew poetry. Okay, I think it's time for a little break. Let's see what I mentioned. Okay. Oh, let me just say, yeah, one other thing. Parallelism is very important in understanding of the text. So if you just read one sentence and not know what comes before or after it, if there are parallel texts to it, you lose a great deal of the intent and meaning of that clause. One of the most beautiful psalms that employs parallelism is Psalm 23. Adonai Ro'i, the Lord is my shepherd. We're going to take a little music break now, and there will be more music breaks as this thing goes on. There is a really wonderful choral treatment of this text by a gentleman by the name of Bobby McFerrin. He's a jazz folk musician. Some of you might know the name. It seems to carry with it strands of, when I'm listening to it, Gregorian chant with its recitation tones. And what do I mean by a recitation tone? I'll give you an example. I'm going to just give an average sentence. I am giving a lecture to you today at 1 o'clock at Temple Bethel. You see, most of the notes were on the 5th degree of the scale. Ba, 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 da, 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 da. I can go on. I want some ice cream. Blah, blah, blah. You get the idea? So that is called a recitation note. Okay. So in this psalm setting, which is a really advanced, he's a wonderful musician, really is. Rather than me telling you, let's listen. We'll listen to a part of it, not the whole thing. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all I need. She makes me lie down in green meadows, beside the still water she will lead. She restores my soul. She rights my wrongs. She leads me in a path of good things and fills my heart with songs. Even though I walk through a dark and dreary land, there is nothing that can shake me. She has said she won't forsake me. I'm in her hand. And it goes on a little longer, but you get the idea. It's really, really beautiful, I think. This is another chiasm, text of Psalm 23. Maybe it's taking a little liberties with it, but this is an interpretation. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, which means there's a kind of a complete care that God has taken care of us, right? Surely, looking at the last sentence, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Why not? Because he's taking care of us, right? So there's a certain symbiosis with that. Let's look at B. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. And looking over here at B prime, thou preparest a table before me in the presence of our enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. So I called it God's action of purposeful restoration. He's trying to restore us to what we should be. So you can see a similarity between B and B prime. C, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Your rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I fear no danger, for you are with me. I don't know why I wrote those two things at the end there, but the idea was there's no reason to fear because of A, B, and B and A. I'm saying this, you don't have to raise your hand, but I'm hoping everybody's clear on the chiasmic patterning of this psalm, at least in my interpretation. Okay, moving on. Let's have another version of this same 23rd Psalm. This is with the Freeport Seventh-day Adventist Church. I love this kind of stuff because it shows different from different parts of the world, different ideas of how to pray. And maybe we can get some ideas. You never know. And you get the idea. By the way, when we heard that piece, and I mentioned earlier that all the Psalms were sung, and I mentioned the word antiphonal, okay? So in that last example, there was a very strong antiphonal quality to what they were doing. So in other words, the choir was singing words, and instead of this presenter presenting the choir, the presenter repeated the words that the choir said. So it's in that same vein that there is a kind of antiphonal feel, even though we're in the same place, but you can imagine how that was in the Holy Temple, for example, where a choir was on, a choir was on one side and the choir was on the other side. Amazing stuff, probably. But that is in the Black Baptist Church, and I find that incredibly meaningful to listen to. Okay, this gentleman, I'm sure some of you don't know, but he was a composer. He wrote a play, many plays actually. One of them was called West Side Story. I sometimes ask students of mine, bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah students, have you heard of Leonard Bernstein? And the answer is absolutely, emphatically not. And have you heard of West Side Story? And most of them give me a quizzical look. And I love each of these kids, and they are not. Then maybe they heard of it, not sure. Okay. So having said that, this is Leonard Bernstein. He was probably the great music teacher to millions in his time. Great conductor, and one of the really at the top of the mountain echelon of great Broadway theater composers, as well as a composer of some much serious music too. By the way, so here is the 23rd Psalm. I'm going to only play one movement of it. It gets a gentle and lyrical setting. The Lord is my shepherd. Psalm 23, we're working on that one psalm right now, right? Opens the second movement of the work called Chichester Psalms, featuring a boy soloist eventually joined by soprano voices with a harp accompaniment, a musical evocation of David and his harp, David the shepherd psalmist. Oh, by the way, just as a by the way, Bernstein created this melody, note for note, using material from a play by Thornton Wilder called The Skin of Our Teeth. This play went on, but Bernstein somehow never got to, his part in it kind of didn't work for whatever reasons. It could have been he was busy with other things or whatever. That just didn't come into being. If you want to see an example of a composer writing music from leftovers, which I love leftovers, by the way, the meal the next day, there's something more organic about it. This is it. This is it. Let me say something. The bitter expression and agitated music of Psalm 2 is part of this second movement. So first, Adonai E, everything is good, but Psalm 2 says, why do the nations rage? So Bernstein is trying to create this polar oppositeness in this one movement that interrupts the tranquility of the boy solo. And by the way, at this, which is the most dramatic moment of this composition, the music features music that was cut from West Side Story. So we don't know that, but we are told that it was cut. Now, matter of fact, I will play something else after we do this movement. The movement is with our performance, and without making anyone feel oh my God, I believe this was done maybe 1994. So who sung in it. You can even see. This is, by the way, the boy solos is Chaz Sadell, Susan and Matt's boy. When he was a little boy, he sings it as best as any kid I've ever heard sing, and I'm not kidding. This is us. Here we go. Okay, that was a wonderful memory for me. We had, a big choir then and people working together to make music, which is the best thing that can ever happen. Having said that, let's just listen to the piece from Skin of Our Teeth. We don't listen to the whole thing, just one little stanza of it, and you will see what I mean by he took music from one play and with a completely different text throws it into the psalm. It's fascinating. Where's that? There we go.
Winds may blow and snows may snow and clouds may come and hide the moon. Still we know that someday soon spring will come again, summer then will follow, birds will come again, nesting in the hollow. Once again we'll grow, for we know that after winter comes spring.
Okay, so you get the idea. That's the exact same melody, and that's what I mean by warming up the music for another thing. What is interesting is, and I'm not, I don't know how to judge it, because there could be negatives about it, not necessarily this, but in general, when someone just throws a melody with something, I'm sure she wasn't talking about Adonai Ro'i, but and using the exact same melody for a different text. There's a bit, and I'm not saying he was, so please, there's a bit of laziness in that on some levels, but it works as a gorgeous melody. There's no question about it. And so bravo to Mr. Bernstein. So with that, I want to go on for a little more music music, vocal and instrumental, played a significant role in the organized institutional worship of the Israel of the Holy Temple. It was an accepted constituent of religious self-expression, music, vocal and instrumental. So by the time the Israelites settled in Canaan, a well-established tradition of vocal and instrumental music as an important mode of, and I say a religious expression, had long existed there and everywhere else in the Middle East. And I'm not going to go give proof, but if we want proof, we'll do another lecture on that. The same was true for of sacrificial practices as a major element of worship in the Holy Temple. So Israel adopted not only the musical, but the sacrificial, but the two were carefully separated in actuality. So in the life and thought of the people of Israel, the Psalms have, since they were written, portrayed a very profound influence in the development of the Jewish people. 1 second here. Okay. I'm sorry about this. Give me a second here. Got my papers mixed up. Oh, here we are. Okay. So, yeah. What I was saying, it was where I wanted to be. So we're talking about the Psalms were very influential in the development of a prayer book, this Jewish Siddur. So the first texts for purely spiritual worship in the history of religion, as far as I know, is kind of an echo of the book of Psalms. In the earliest religious services, many of the Psalms were simply just part of the service, and maybe the bulk of the original content of the service. And it's interesting to say that because right now Kabbalat Shabbat is 8 Psalms, and Lecha Dodi is a poem from the 1600s, but it's all Psalms. And so today, to this day, the Siddur is really chock full of Psalms or Psalm verses. In the daily morning services, we have Psalms 145 through 150 are done, the Hallelujah Psalms. Here's one of the most famous of them, the Ashrei. This is at the beginning of the Slichot service as well, on Shabbat, all over the place. This is Psalm, the Ashrei. And let's listen to it. It is with men's choir and one of the great cantors of my lifetime. Sorry about that. So beautiful. That cantor is Naftali Herstig. He sang here at a concert in 1996. And that was, as he tells me, that is Gideon Zellemeyer, the reason why he became a cantor, because of that concert. So um, the synagogue has been very fortunate to have him be here. Also, he sang at Beth David. Just, I think, the great voice of our time as far as Chazanut is concerned. And that's that. So I want to give you another example of that kind of men's choir music. And as a matter of fact, I probably should have played this next verse, this next piece previous to the Hashrei, but it comes from the same part of the world, which is Eastern Europe. This is a piece called Psalm 71. It is actually called Concerto for double bass, meaning these kind of basses go an octave below what most basses go. So, but I want to just give you that sound feeling to the thing, okay? So this is a man by the name of Pavel Chezhnikov. He, 1877, 1944. By the age of 30, he's a Russian, Moscow. He completes about 400 pieces of sacred choral works. It was gotten a little tougher because under communist rule, you were not supposed to produce any form of sacred art. So this guy was a rebel. So in response, he composes another 100 pieces and a secular works, and he conducts secular choirs, Moscow Academy Choir, Bolshoi Theater Choir. He's a very good musician. And he passes away of malnutrition in 1944 while he was waiting on a Moscow bread line. I want to play the opening of Psalm 71. I'll get this technical stuff one day or another. So you can see, if you were really listening, which I hope you were, the resemblance of the Psalm 71 by Chezhnikov and the Psalm 145, it's the same sound world, the same, technically, the same harmonies, the same use of men's choirs as a force in Eastern European liturgical music. And, it's just the great cantors, the ones the great improvisers, the Rosenblatts, the Kuzovitskys, those of you might know those names, the Galants, the Pinchiks, all came from that part of Europe. None of them were from Western, well, a couple from Western Europe, but not of that type. And all of them, anyone worth their weight in anything, Adam Esquire, that at that time. Now I would say anyone who has their weight in anything should have a choir anyway. But that's my thing. So so we move on. Psalms are recited on every holiday and occasion. Let's try Psalm 19. And here we have a little example of it for the leader of Psalm of David. The heavens declare the glory of God. The sky proclaims his handiwork. Day to day makes utterance. Night to night speaks out. There is no utterance. There is no word. Their voice carries throughout the earth. Their works to the end of the world. Very, very fascinating composition. It is a piece called Tehillim by a composer, Steve Reich, still around now, but he's a very, very, very well-known, internationally well-known composer. I want you to really listen to how a single voice with some drums becomes 2 and 4, and the lines kind of run into each other in a kind of kaleidoscopic manner. It's fascinating. It's modern, but it's very listenable in my mind. I shouldn't say but, it's also very listenable. Etc. It goes on for another 5 or 6 minutes, and I would love so much to play these things in entirety, but oh, they want to play anyway, whether I want them to or not. We move on. Let's see here. Yes. So now we have a wonderful Sephardic, actually Moroccan version of another psalm for Shabbat, actually. This is Psalm 92, Tov Lehodot. It is good to give thanks to the Lord, to sing praises unto thy name, O Most High. This is a really wonderful friend of mine, and in my mind, one of the great cantors around now. Aharon ben Susan also has sung here. So here goes, just a little of it, not a lot, but Tov Lehodot in a kind of this is his composition, I believe, in a kind of a Sephardic Moroccan style. If I can find the arrow, here we go. etc. We move on. This is the last phrases of Psalm 92, exactly like we do it on Shabbat, Kabbalat Shabbat and our shul. The melody is different. It's a beautiful, and the reason why I want to include this is by a man by the name of Immanuel Kirshner, who was I don't know, student, but a protege of Louis Lewandowski, and he had a synagogue south of Berlin, I believe. He wrote some really, really great music that no one does. This is Tzadik Katamar, and by a wonderful combination of choirs, the Nashira, which is a Jewish choir, and the Choral Arts Festival, Choral Arts of Philadelphia. Very recent performance. I'm not sure who the conductor is, but I like Moshe. Does a great job. This is Tzadik Katamar. On the holidays, Shalosh Regalim, Hanukkah, and Rosh Chodesh, the regular psalm readings consist of Psalms 113 through 118, all of which are songs of rejoicing about God saving us from what he saves us, and are under the grouping of a word called Hallel, which means praise. This is by an Israeli composer, Yechezkel Braun, Psalm 113. If you can hang on with me for about 15 minutes longer, those of you who can, and then we will call it, but I'm going to skip around here. I want to do one more snippet of a piece from Hallel. This is Psalm 115, 115. This is the one that if some of you who come to shul, the text Atzabehem. So this is Naftali Hirschtig's son, Natani. He's currently a cantor in, I believe, in Long Island. I can't remember the name of the city, but he's one of the great cantors in the world today. Here we go. East Hampton, that's it, the Hampton Synagogue. Okay, and what I'd like to do now is move on to the last topic, if I can have a few moments with this. And this is a piece from Shemot, chapter 15, not 51. Oh my God, chapter 15, verses 1 through 19. This is the piece called Shirat Hayam, or it starts, some people know it, Az Yashir Moshe, which is the portion that we will be doing this weekend. And I want to close this little meeting of ours, this chat, with some just a discussion on this piece. So in Psalm 118, in Hallel, there is a text. I wonder if I have it here. Here it is. I'm going here. It says on the top here in the bold, with my, it says, Oziv Zimrat Vayhi Li Lishua. That is in Psalm 118 of the Psalms. The same text is in chapter 15 of Shemot, in Az Yashir Moshe, in Shirat Hayam. And what does that mean? God is my strength and song and will become my salvation. So I want to use that as the pivot from our talk about Psalms to, as life goes on, we go to our portion for this week, okay? So this Shirat Hayam is the first great poem that employs singing. And if you recall, the thing that the quotation that I did from one of the Mishnayot at the heading of this lecture, when we talked about Abraham didn't sing, Isaac didn't sing, Adam didn't, but the Israelites sing when they crossed the Red Sea was the first time that they sang. And in that sense, I can call poetically, this is our first psalm. This is our first psalm. Okay, so structurally, again, I want to get back to the structure of the poetry of Jewish poetry, of Hebrew poetry. Let me just give you a couple seconds of this guy singing the Az Yashir. He's wonderful.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה, נטה את ידך על הים, וישובו המים על מצרים, על רכבו ועל פרשה, משה את ידו על הים, וישוב הים לפנות בוקר לאיתנו, ומצרים נסים לקראתו, וינער אדוני את מצרים בתוך הים, וישובו המים, ויכסו את הרכב ואת הפרשים, לכל חיל פרעה הבאים אחריהם בים, לא נשאר בהם עד אחד. ובני ישראל הלכו ביבשה בתוך הים, והמים להם חומה, מימינם ומשמאלם.
So you see, there are certain specific melodies that are sung to this that are not, they're Torah trope and also non-Torah trope. Not for this lecture, for a later time. I want to point out one thing. There are poetic parallels in this too. So these are called what I would call double statements in Shirat Hayam. So in sentence 6, you have Yemincha Adonai Nedari Bakoach, and then Yemincha Adonai Tiratz Oyev. Your right hand, Lord, was majestic in power. Your right hand, Lord. So, and then the next one, Mi Chamocha Ba'ilim Adonai. Mi Kamocha. There's a little Cha and Ka. Nedar Bakodash, Norati Loto Sefela. Who among the gods is like you, Lord? Who like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glory, working wonders? What I'm asking you to notice is at sentence 6, there is that double statement. In sentence 11 of this Shirat Hayam, a double statement, and sentence 16 of this, a double statement. Adia avor amcha Adonai, adia avor am zukanita. Basically, the adia avor is this big text, but it has to be preceded by the sentence before. Terror and dread will fall upon them. Incredibly dramatic stuff. By the power of your arm, they will be still as stone. And this is adia avor, until your people pass by, Lord. Excuse me, until the people you bought pass by. Now I want to brought pass by, excuse me. This is part of the structure of Shirat Hayam. So you have Shirat Hayam, as a matter of fact, I did a little thing here. There's the introduction. There's verses 2 through 6. Remember, that's when the first double pattern was going on. At the end of the first stanza, there's the double pattern. At the end of the second stanza, there's a double pattern, repetition of words. At the end of the third stanza is a double pattern, repetition of words. Then there's a 2-sentence conclusion, which, by the way, after that comes something very special. But the thing to know about all these stanzas, poetically, they are absolutely equal in length, 48 to 50 words. Fascinating, I think, fascinating. Okay, just very quickly, a little, we'll do a little of it. This is a Nahum Nardi, Oziv Zimrat Yah, that statement that we talked about just before. And he's one of the great composers of pioneer Israel. And this is one of the great sopranos, by the way. If any of you know the Cantalube Chant d'Auvergne, she is one of the great proponents of that piece. She's a great soprano. And I want to end with this last Sephardic version. Actually, it could be I think sung by the Syrian Jews, possibly. It's a wonderful piece. Oziv Zimrat Yah again. Before I want to end, I want to say that after the sentence 19, pasuk 19 of Shirat Hayam, there's pasuk 20 and 21, which is this. And Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took her drum in her hand, and all the women went out after her with drums and dances. And Miriam answered them, "Sing to God, for God is highly exalted. Horse and rider, God is thrown into the sea." So after all that darkness of the Shirat Hayam, the battle between the forces of good and evil, Miriam explodes in joy. And this is way before the Psalms were written, but you can see the dichotomy of the from the depths to the heights. Kind of an inversion of what we do at night, but from the depths to the heights of celebration and all that. So actually at night we celebrate no matter what. But I want to just play very quickly this Oziv Zimrat Yah, and we'll call it a day. This is very short. Of a children's choir. I love this melody.
Oziv, 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 Oziv.
And thank you all so very much for joining. 1 second, I'm trying to get Thank you, everybody.
Joseph,
Yes.
in the Psalm 113, was that Zubin Mehta conducting?
Um, I don't know. I just put a picture of him in there. I try to, when the horns were doing something, I put a picture of the Israeli horn section. It was kind of mix and match kind of thing. But I picked
It
some
looked
of
like
those
it looked like Zubin Mehta was
Yeah,
conducting
no, there
that.
was a picture of Zuba Mehta conducting too. Absolutely. And obviously, my favorite part was Chaz Sadell singing. That was my favorite.
Oh
part.
yeah.
It's an oldie, but I texted him and told him you put it in. He said, I did have my moment, he said.
That's great.
How old is he now, Matt?
He's 37.
Oh my
Oh.
God.
The thing is, the truth is, and I'm saying this as a musician, every single note was picture perfect on the right in the middle of the pitch. By the way, I have to say one other thing. A huge thanks to Paul Logan for helping me put this on. But thank you all for coming on. There is much more to say, but we can stay till the night. Then there's too much.
Joseph, this is drilling deep, but when you, just a couple of slides ago, when you said he brought instead of he bought,
Right.
I thought the text was Kanita. I thought that does mean he bought. You
Uh,
bought.
Yeah, but that doesn't translate well into English. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I just wondered about that. It was very interesting.
Yeah. But you're right. You're absolutely right.
Thank you, Joseph. I gotta go lay
Thanks.
down. I'm
Thank you.
fading.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hazan, while you were speaking of
Thank you.
Bernstein, I've got a Symphony No. 3 Kaddish
Yes.
that he also did, right? So, but
Right.
the Kaddish isn't a psalm, is it?
No, the Kaddish is not a psalm. That is a piece in Aramaic. The Psalms are in Hebrew.
Okay,
It's a more of it's a rabbinic period Kaddish.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, Cantor.
Okay,
Thank you, Cantor.
absolutely. Take care, everybody.